Poor girl snuck into the company by mistake, caused total chaos, and captured the millionaire CEO's heart. She didn't belong in that world, not with her fraying sneakers, not with the paper in her pocket that smelled like hope and coffee. She was just supposed to deliver a letter, not knock over a cup of pins, and not fall to her knees in front of the man everyone feared, and definitely not make him laugh for the first time in years. But fate doesn't care about schedules or security badges. Sometimes the heart opens, not to the person who fits in, but to the one who crashes in. Loud, clumsy, and unforgettable, the letter she wasn't allowed to deliver. There are skyscrapers that seem to pierce the sky, and then there are the ones that pierce your pride. The ones so tall, so spotless, they make you question everything about yourself just by standing in front of them. She stood at the base of one now, backpack slipping off her shoulder, chewing the side of her lip like it might give her courage. Her shoes were soaked from the slush. Her jeans had a rip that wasn't fashionable, just old. In her hand, she clutched a letter so tightly the edges had curled from the warmth of her fingers. Her mentor had asked her for one simple favor. Just deliver this to Thomas Whitestone, in person. A name that echoed like a vault door. Locked, distant, impossible. She whispered the plan under her breath like a prayer. Go in, hand it over, walk away. No one even needs to know I was there. But the revolving door had other plans. She misjudged the rhythm, got stuck halfway, and spun around like a confused hamster before finally bursting through, directly into the path of the receptionist's desk, sending a tall cup of pens flying like confetti at a business funeral. I'm here to deliver a letter, she announced breathlessly, holding it up like a badge of honor. The receptionist didn't even flinch. Do you have an appointment, clearance badge, internal referral, or anything legal? She blinked. I have heart? A silent buzzer. A security guard who looked like a refrigerator in a suit stepped forward. No badge, no entry. That might have been the end of it if the elevator hadn't chimed open right at that moment. If she hadn't panicked. If her feet hadn't suddenly decided just run. And just like that, she slipped inside, clutching her letter like it was her last chance at a future she didn't even believe in. The elevator shot up, she crashed into a guy holding 3 lattes, the cappuccino dripped into her hair like whipped foam shame. She pressed the first button she saw. The door opened into what looked like a production set. Wires, stage lights, interns with clipboards. Someone shoved a headset onto her head, someone else mistook her for the new intern. She tried to walk quietly but managed to trip over a roll of duct tape and knock down a tower of promotional mugs. Who is that? Someone whispered. Probably here for soul retrieval, someone else replied. Finally, she spotted a massive oak door at the end of the corridor. Something about it said important. It also said do not enter, but she'd already passed the point of subtlety. She slipped inside and fell right onto her knees, right in front of the man himself, right as he turned, holding a document worth millions. He expected a VP, a courier, an intern. He got her hair, a mess, eyes too wide, hands outstretched like she was offering a crown made of coffee-stained paper. I have a letter, she blurted. He blinked. You do realize this is my office? I thought this was the restroom, with a desk, a fireplace, and a city skyline. Well, yeah, I mean, fancy restrooms exist. I saw one on TikTok. He didn't laugh, but he didn't call security either. Instead, he took the letter but kept his eyes on her, like she was a word he couldn't quite define. And who exactly are you? She stood, brushing herself off, pretending her knee hadn't just slammed into a $6,000 0-cents mahogany desk. Alice. Alice Silva, ninja messenger, freelance paper carrier, and, apparently now, accidental trespasser. He tilted his head. You broke into my company, nearly hijacked an event, and now you're in my private office. I'd prefer the term improvised access. The corner of his mouth twitched. That was the first sign. That tiny, almost smile, like a crack in stone, like thaw in winter. He read the letter in silence. She watched his eyes scan the words, expected him to frown, to call for someone, to dismiss her with a single wave. Instead, he looked up and said softly, You know this man? She nodded. He raised me. Sort of. Like a half-mentor, half-grandpa with emotional constipation. He made me promise I'd bring that to you, personally. He folded the paper, tapped it once against the desk. Then sit. You've earned 5 minutes of my time. She did, and nearly sank straight into the luxurious leather chair like it was swallowing her whole. In the silence that followed, she swung her feet lightly, trying not to look impressed, trying not to feel like the world's biggest mistake. But Thomas Whitestone was watching her. Not with annoyance, with curiosity, like something inside him, long, quiet, had just blinked awake. And somewhere, beneath the noise of fluorescent lights and investor deadlines, the story had already begun. And neither of them saw coming. Chapter 1. The interview that wasn't. The doors to the event floor slid open with a chime, but to Alice it sounded more like a gong announcing her doom. She'd picked a random button in the elevator, any button, really, desperate to escape the security guard who had started chasing her down the lobby like she'd stolen something, not that she hadn't practically stolen access to the building. Her hair still smelled like cappuccino foam from the poor soul she'd accidentally tackled earlier. Her boots squelched softly with every step. And her backpack? It kept thumping against her back like it was scolding her for every decision she'd made that morning. She looked around. Bright studio lights. Stage platforms. Corporate banners that read things like innovate, accelerate, dominate. People with earpieces and clipboards darted like over-caffeinated bees. This was not a waiting room. "Oh my God, the spokesperson finally arrived," a frantic intern shouted, pointing directly at her. "Get her in makeup." Before Alice could even say, "I'm just lost," she was yanked forward by a girl with glitter eyeliner and an industrial-sized can of hairspray. Wait, this is a misunderstanding." Alice stammered as she was shoved into a swiveling makeup chair, her reflection spinning past her like a carousel of bad life choices. "No time," someone barked. "She goes on stage in 6. Alice opened her mouth. The foundation brush stuffed itself into her cheek. She coughed on setting powder. A headset was placed over her curls. Someone adjusted her badge, which now read, "Keynote Speaker, A Silva." She stared at it. A Silva. How is Silva? Close enough. Before she could protest, a woman with a clipboard leaned down and said, "Just smile, present the product, and walk off. No improvising." Alice blinked. Present what? But the woman had already disappeared into the sea of suits and LED screens. Then, a deep breath. A countdown. Someone whispered, "She's on in 3, and Alice was pushed onto the stage. The lights blinded her. Rows upon rows of sharp suits and steely eyes stared back. It looked like every executive in Chicago had shown up. 100 phones held at shoulder height recording. Thomas Whitestone himself sat near the back, arms folded, unreadable. Alice froze. The spotlight hit her like a tractor beam. She took one step forward and promptly tripped. The microphone stand caught her hip. A banner came loose. Someone in the front row gasped. Alice grabbed the mic like it was her last lifeline. She smiled, wide, "Good evening, ladies, and people who look terrifyingly important," she said. A ripple of awkward laughter. Alice cleared her throat. "I'm A. Silva, and I'm here to, unveil something. Life-changing." She glanced behind her. The massive display screen flickered. Then, the Windows screensaver popped up. Floating logos, flying toasters, one even bounced off a corner. Alice blinked. And there it is, our most advanced technology yet. The toaster revolution. We're calling it the Crisp 3000. Scattered laughter. Thomas's hand moved, slowly, to cover his mouth. Alice powered through. This amazing innovation toasts both sides. Equally. No more flipping, no more dry waffles. We're solving real problems, people. By now, the audience was chuckling. One guy in the second row whispered, "This is the best launch event we've ever had." Alice was on a roll, though not the one she wanted. "I know what you're thinking," she added. "Who is this woman? Where did she come from? And is she really wearing mismatched socks? She lifted one foot. Confirmed, one rainbow stripe, one polka dot. The crowd lost it. Even Thomas cracked a real full laugh. She curtsied. "Thank you. You've been beautiful. Please, don't fire me." And with that, she tried to exit stage left. Caught her pant leg. Knocked over the light rig. Screamed, "I'm okay," as it tilted like the Titanic. Blackout. 20 minutes later, Alice sat in the hallway, barefoot, holding her ruined boots in one hand and a granola bar in the other. The taste of humiliation was strong, slightly saltier than the bar. Her phone buzzed. 0 missed calls, 0 messages, 0 dignity. Just her luck. Then, polished shoes entered her vision. She looked up. Thomas Whitestone. He was smiling. "You do realize," he said, "you just turned our product launch into a stand-up comedy special." Alice gave him a sheepish grin. "I told you I was a professional." "A professional what? Chaos coordinator? Corporate disaster artist," she offered. He folded his arms, shaking his head. "You hijacked my event. Technically, your staff kidnapped me with contour brushes." Silence. Then, he laughed again. Real laughter. Deep, almost unwilling, like it had been locked up for years and someone finally found the key. Alice felt her heart flutter in a way she didn't expect. "I'll be honest," she said, "I was just trying to deliver the letter." He reached into his blazer pocket. She held it up. "You mean this one?" She nodded. He looked down at it again like it had changed its meaning since he read it, then folded it carefully and tucked it away. "I should fire you," he said. "You haven't hired me." "True. But—" He studied her for a moment. "But you made an impression, the good kind." Strangely, Alice blinked. "So, I'm not banned from the building?" "Oh, you're absolutely banned. From elevators, stages, microphones." She groaned. "But you start work tomorrow," he added. "Entry level, temporary, under surveillance." Alice's mouth dropped open. "You're serious? You said you were reliable." "Reliable-ish." He extended his hand. She shook it, and for a brief second as her fingers met his, she felt the world slow down. The laughter, the lights, the awkwardness, all of it blurred around that strange little moment. When a CEO met chaos and didn't look away. The next morning, Alice arrived at 8:03 OIM sharp, dragging a backpack that looked like it had survived a natural disaster and clutching a plant pot she'd named Fernando. The receptionist narrowed her eyes. "You again?" Alice beamed. "Official employee now. Temporary chaos consultant. Where's the copier?" The woman pointed to the far wall. And that's where Alice found her desk, a lonely shelf beside the copier and a dying ficus plant. She set down Fernando, pulled out a mini fan, a thermos, and a tiny flag that said, "Team Alice." "This," she whispered, "is the beginning of something gloriously unqualified." Thomas passed by an hour later. Paused. Stared. She saluted. "Morning, boss." He shook his head and kept walking. But not before she caught it again. The corner of his mouth, twitching upward. Not annoyance. Not pity. Something else. Something dangerous. Like a man starting to wonder if chaos might actually be what he's been missing. Chapter 2. The Girl Who Should Have Been Fired. Her first official day began with a printer jam, 2 spilt coffees, and an unsanctioned karaoke solo in the copy room. Alice Silva had only been on the executive floor of Whitestone Global for 3 hours, and already she'd managed to lock herself inside a filing cabinet room because she thought the keypad was a light switch. She emerged triumphantly with ink on her cheek, her blouse tucked in only on one side, and a victorious smile like she'd just won an Olympic event in corporate navigation. Across the floor, Thomas Whitestone stood behind the tinted glass of his office, staring. He hadn't summoned her, but somehow her laughter filtered through the cracks in the walls. He'd spent years building those walls, around his office, around his name, around his heart. And now, some girl with a cracked voice and a cactus-shaped pen was chipping them down with a stapler. "Did anyone authorize her?" whispered Janice from HR as Alice wandered into the conference room, looking for a snack. "She's on the roster," muttered Liam from legal. "Under temporary onboarding liaison. That's not even a real position." "It is now," Liam sighed, watching Alice knock over a chair and apologize to it. She was a walking accident, and yet no one could look away. Thomas called her into his office by 10:15 a.m. She entered like a storm in polka dot socks, holding a clipboard and a banana. "Reporting for duty," she said, saluting with the banana before realizing it was not, in fact, a writing tool. He blinked. "You were supposed to alphabetize these contracts," he said calmly, pointing to a stack taller than her. "I did, in the order of how emotionally taxing they felt. That's not how the alphabet works. It is in my heart." He looked at her, not angry, just baffled. "Why haven't I fired you yet?" he asked, mostly to himself. She grinned. "Because I'm unforgettable." By noon, Alice had broken the office coffee machine. To be fair, it had been blinking oddly since she tried inserting a caramel candy into the capsule slot. "I thought it needed a little sweetness," she mumbled to the technician. Thomas received the incident report while on a call with Tokyo. He muted the call and laughed quietly to himself. Again. It was a strange thing, this ripple she caused. Thomas wasn't used to ripple. His world was smooth, clinical, precise. He planned his days to the minute, meals to the calorie, emotions to the decimal. But with Alice, he found himself checking the hallway to see if she was tripping over anything new. He noticed he stayed longer in the office just in case she'd pass by again. He'd started noticing. At 2:00 p.m., she knocked over his bonsai tree. He didn't flinch. "Sorry," she said, crouching to scoop dirt off the marble floor. "I was trying to water it. Turns out my thermos wasn't full of water." He raised an eyebrow. It was ginger tea. The tiny tree now smelled like flu season. She stood slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. "You're not mad?" He was quiet. Then, "No." "Disappointed?" "Also no." She looked at him, really looked. He was handsome in that statue way, all carved jawlines and impassive eyes, but something softened just then. Not in his face, but in the air between them. "You're very calm for a man who just watched his corporate shrub get emotionally violated," she said softly. He stared at her for a long moment. "You're very odd." "Thank you, it's taken years of practice." A beat passed. Neither of them moved. Then he said, "Come with me." She blinked. "Am I being exiled?" He almost smiled. Something like that. They took the elevator down to the parking garage. Thomas's driver opened the door of a sleek black car. Alice hesitated. "This looks like something that drives itself." "It doesn't," he said, motioning her inside. "Good," she muttered. "I don't trust machines with souls." They drove in silence for a while, through downtown Chicago, past the river, toward the edge of the city. The car was quiet, but the world outside buzzed with life. Alice stared out the window, fidgeting with a piece of lint on her sleeve. "Where are we going?" she asked finally. "Somewhere you can't break anything." She looked at him sideways. "That's a challenge I accept." They arrived at a small, private conservatory. Not fancy, not formal, just quiet. Green and glass, and a low hum of water flowing through fountains. Inside, Thomas walked a few steps ahead of her, his posture straight, his gaze careful. Like he didn't know what to do in his own skin when she was around. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, trailing her fingers through a misted fern. He stopped, looked at her. "Because I wanted to hear..." Silence. She tilted her head. "And you brought me." He almost laughed. "You surprise me, constantly." "Is that a good thing?" "I don't know yet." She stepped closer, her eyes met his. "I'm not polished, Thomas. I don't know how to blend in here. I didn't go to Ivy League. My resume was typed in a library and printed on the back of a grocery receipt." He didn't flinch. "I don't care about that." "Then what do you care about?" He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked a few steps into the green silence. She followed. In the center of the conservatory was a bench under a glass dome. They sat there, side by side, saying nothing. It was the first time in his adult life Thomas Whitestone felt like he wasn't performing, like maybe, just maybe, he could breathe. And Alice? She wasn't thinking about fitting in. She was thinking about how his shoulder sat inches from hers, how the air felt different here, how her name sounded when he said it. Not just Alice, but like it meant something. By the time they returned to the office, the sun had dipped behind the skyline. Alice gathered her things from her makeshift desk. Before leaving, she stuck a small sticky note on Thomas's door. He found it later that night. It read, "Thanks for the exile. The plants forgive me. Probably." He stared at it for a long time. Didn't throw it away. They didn't even move it. He just let it stay there. Like a piece of something unexpected. Something unplanned. Something beginning. Chapter 3. The Ex-Fiancée returns. It started with perfume. Not the cheap kind sold at drugstores, but the kind you smelled before you even saw her. Expensive, haunting, too deliberate to be an accident. Alice was halfway through organizing budget folders, by color, not by date. She thought it made them feel more loved. When the elevator opened with a soft ding, every head in the office turned. The sound of stilettos on marble echoed like a countdown. Click, click. And then she appeared, a walking Vogue cover, wrapped in silk and secrets. Natasha Langford? Alice didn't know her, but she didn't have to. The air around her changed like it did before a storm. The receptionist sat up straighter, the intern shrank. Even the vending machine seemed to fall silent. Alice watched Natasha march confidently toward Thomas's office without knocking. The door opened, the door closed. The whole floor exhaled. 5 minutes later, curiosity devoured Alice. She told herself she wasn't eavesdropping, she was just hydrating. Near Thomas's office, with a glass pressed lightly to the door, inside, Natasha's voice curled like smoke. "Thomas, darling, still drinking your coffee black? So dramatic." Thomas's voice, colder. "What do you want, Natasha?" Echoed again. "Can't an ex-fiancé visit without an ulterior motive?" "No, she can't." Alice's eyes widened. "Ex-fiancé?" Natasha purred. "I heard about your little intern, or is she a new experiment, a phase? She doesn't belong here." Alice felt her chest tighten, the words slipping through the crack in the door like poison. "She's not your concern," Thomas said evenly. "Oh, but she is. You're Thomas Whitestone. Everything about you is my concern, especially the things that can ruin your reputation." Outside, Alice felt like she was breathing through cotton. When Natasha swept out moments later, her eyes met Alice's. And just like that, she smiled. "Beautiful, deadly." "Careful, sweetie," Natasha whispered. "Men like him don't keep toys, they replace them." Back at her copier side desk, Alice sat in silence. For once, she didn't hum. Didn't organize paper clips into families. Didn't even decorate her plant, Fernando, with stickers like usual. Because something inside her, something she didn't have a name for, had twisted. Thomas found her later in the break room, staring into the coffee machine like it might tell her her future. "You okay?" he asked. She turned, forcing a smile. "Of course, I'm fantastic. Who wouldn't be after being subtly threatened by a woman who smells like a rich museum and probably names her yachts after Greek goddesses?" He hesitated. "You heard?" "Most of it," she said. "Don't worry. I'm great at pretending things don't hurt." "Alice, I know, I don't belong here. You don't have to explain." But he stepped forward. "That's not what I was going to say." She looked up at him, really looked, and for the first time he didn't hide. "She's not the story anymore," he said. "You are." Alice blinked fast. Then, "Why do I feel like a subplot waiting to be cut?" He exhaled slowly. "Because Natasha makes everyone feel like that. She weaponizes doubt. But she knew about us, whatever us is." "There is an us," he said, more certainty in his voice now than ever before. "And it doesn't end just because she came back." Alice's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then prove it." The next morning she arrived to find a post-it note stuck to her desk. Simple. Handwritten. You belong here. She pressed it to her chest for a second before sticking it inside her backpack, between her journal pages, just above her list of things she never thought she'd have. But the war wasn't over. Natasha returned every day that week, each time with a different excuse. Returning a blazer Thomas had left at her penthouse ages ago, dropping off an old contract just for reference. And Alice? She responded by creating increasingly ridiculous job titles for herself whenever Natasha appeared. Monday, VP of Cross-Department Snack Allocation. Tuesday, Executive Assistant to the Temporary Emotional Stability Manager. Wednesday, Lead Investigator, CEO Smile Frequency Department. Thomas didn't say a word, but every time Alice spoke with her impossible confidence, he looked like a man trying very hard not to laugh in the middle of a funeral. By Friday, Natasha's patience thinned. She cornered Alice at the building's cafe, perfectly manicured hands around a latte she wasn't drinking. "I'll be honest," Natasha began, taking off her sunglasses with the flourish of someone who thought her glare should be trademarked. "I don't know what you're doing here." "I work here," Alice said brightly. "I even have a plant. His name is Fernando. He's emotionally unstable, but we're working through it." "You don't fit," Natasha said flatly. "Not in this office, not in his life." Alice smiled. "That's funny, because every time I trip, he catches me. And you know what they say. If a man will forgive you for breaking his printer and spilling coffee on his bonsai tree, maybe, just maybe, he sees something worth keeping." Natasha's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Alice didn't flinch. That night, Thomas found her on the rooftop balcony of the building, staring out over the city with a grape juice in one hand and a snack in the other. "You came up here alone?" he asked. "Yup, figured if I was going to be dramatic, I needed a skyline." He stepped beside her. "I never meant for you to feel second," he said. She didn't answer right away. Then, "What were you before her?" "A blueprint," he said. "Drawn by other people?" "And now?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But with you, it's the first time. I want to find out." Alice turned to him. "This isn't just a fling, is it?" He met her eyes. "No, it's not." Then, softer, "Is that okay with you?" She nodded, then took his hand. And in the wind of that high rooftop, with the city buzzing beneath them and the ghost of an ex-fiancée somewhere below, Alice realized the girl who should have been fired was becoming the reason he stayed. Chapter 4: Rumors, Rice, and Office Chaos. By Monday morning, Alice was a legend. Not in the corner office, briefcase, executive power move kind of way, but in the way you remember your favorite sitcom character. The girl who broke a vending machine by hugging it. The one who brought her own cheese bread pillow to boost morale. The one who allegedly turned a product launch into a live comedy hour. Except now, she was also the girl who was, possibly, dating the CEO. And in a corporate jungle like Whitestone Global, possibly was enough to set the halls on fire. Alice knew something was off the second she walked in. People smiled, too sweetly. Others whispered, too obviously. Even the janitor gave her a thumbs up. She dropped her lunchbox off at her desk, a converted paper shelf near the copier, then spotted a neon pink sticky note taped to her monitor. "You're the most talked about employee since Greg fainted during the fire drill. We're rooting for you, or placing bets, depends on the department." She snorted. "Famous at last, Fernando," she said, patting her succulent plant. But beneath the humor, her stomach twisted. There's a kind of silence before a storm, and this wasn't her usual chaos. This was a whisper storm, one she couldn't joke her way out of. The rumor grew by the hour. By lunch, it had evolved into a full-blown conspiracy. She got the job through a family connection. She's using Thomas to climb the ladder. She's not clumsy, it's all part of her manipulation act. The worst part? She didn't even know how to manipulate anyone. She once tried flirting with a barista and ended up paying for someone else's order. Thomas called her into his office that afternoon. She walked in carefully, holding a mug of herbal tea like a peace offering. "I didn't spill anything today," she said brightly. He didn't smile. There was a printout on his desk. It was from compliance. A formal report. An anonymous complaint, accusing Alice of using inappropriate personal connections to obtain her job and influence leadership. Alice stared at the page, then blinked. Wait, is this real? I wish it weren't, Thomas said, his voice low. But now, HR has to investigate. It's protocol. Alice let out a nervous laugh. But I still get to keep my plant, right? I mean, they can't fire Fernando. He's innocent. He didn't laugh. That hurt more than the paper in her hand. She spent the rest of the day in a quiet panic. In the compliance meeting, she was asked to write a statement, detail her qualifications, justify her unusual presence in the CEO's office so frequently. By the time she finished writing, her hand shook. She hadn't done anything wrong. But guilt has a way of creeping in when people start throwing shadows. Back at her desk, she sat motionless, until Thomas approached. I'm fixing this, he said. Alice didn't look up. Can you really? He knelt down beside her desk, voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. I don't know who's behind this yet, but I promise you're not going through it alone. She blinked, then whispered, It was Natasha. Thomas paused. He didn't deny it. He didn't deflect. Then I'll deal with her. Alice finally looked at him. You believe me? I'd believe you even if you said you were a space alien here on intergalactic internship. She let out a broken laugh, then wiped her cheek. She hadn't realized she was crying. That night, Alice wandered into the office cafeteria, sat at a lonely table with a tray of macaroni and juice, and stared at her reflection in the spoon. She wasn't made for this world. She didn't wear heels well, didn't know how to be untouchable, didn't know how to survive on appearances. She just showed up, with her backpack, her jokes, her heart. And maybe that was the problem. She didn't know how to pretend. The next morning, the whispers were worse. Until Thomas held an impromptu all-hands meeting. Alice sat in the back. Thomas stood at the front, hands steady, voice firm. I've heard the rumors, I've seen the complaint, so let me say this plainly. Yes, Alice Silva works here. Yes, I hired her. And yes, I trust her. Gasps. A few raised eyebrows. But Thomas didn't flinch. She didn't come here with connections. She came here with courage. And if anyone thinks she doesn't belong, maybe you've forgotten what this company is supposed to stand for. A pause. Then he looked straight at her and smiled. Alice nearly dropped her juice. She was used to laughing at things, tripping over things, turning embarrassment into art. But now someone had stood up for her. Really stood up. And it made her feel like something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Worth it. Later that afternoon, Thomas found her in the hallway, reorganizing the emergency supply closet, badly. You okay? He asked. She turned to him. I've always been okay, I'm just not used to being defended. He nodded, then leaned against the doorframe. You don't have to prove yourself, Alice. Not to them, not to me. She looked at him, trying not to cry. Again. And why does it still hurt? He didn't answer. He just stepped closer and offered his hand. She took it. No words, just warmth and a silent promise. But across the building, Natasha watched from a corner window. Her lips pressed into a hard line. If a whisper couldn't destroy Alice, she'd need something louder, more calculated, more permanent. The game had changed. And Alice wasn't just the quirky girl with a backpack anymore. He was a threat. Chapter 5. Emails, Embarrassment, and a PR nightmare. It started with a croissant. Alice had brought a box of them to share. Her peace offering after the rumor storm, after compliance, after standing under fluorescent lights wondering if kindness still had a place in glass buildings. She passed them out like holiday cards. Eat one, she told the intern who always whispered about her. I promise they're not poisoned. I only use my chaos for good now. Laughter bubbled. Real this time. People were warming to her. Maybe not fully, but enough. Then everything exploded. At 11:07 a.m., Thomas's executive assistant stormed into his office, face pale, voice shaking. Sir, we have a situation. He didn't look up from his laptop. Define situation. She slid a printout across the desk. An email from Alice's account, sent to Whitestone Global's biggest international supplier? Subject line, "Let's make this juicy." The message? Wild promises. Inappropriate incentives. Grammar so tragic it bordered on comedy. Offers of relaxation perks and personalized gift baskets with mini massages. Thomas blinked. Is this real? It went to the full board, the assistant whispered. And legal. And the supplier. Silence. Then Thomas stood, and the floor under Whitestone Global began to shift. Alice had just returned from microwaving tea in a soup mug when 3 department heads stared her down like she was a bomb in heels. Come with us. She was led to a conference room so sterile it smelled like panic and printer ink. There, someone slid a copy of the email in front of her. She read it, paused, then burst out laughing. Is this fan fiction? No one laughed. I didn't write this, she said quickly. I don't even know what a logistics reciprocity clause is. I thought KPI stood for ketchup per item. Still, the eyes around her stayed cold. Legal spoke next. The email came from your login credentials, sent from your workstation. Alice swallowed. But I don't. We have IT checking the activity logs, someone said flatly. Alice's voice cracked. You have to believe me. They didn't say they didn't. But they didn't say they did. Back in his office, Thomas stared at the data from IT. Login activity. Remote access. And one name. Natasha Langford. A device registered to her. Used credentials traced back to Alice's station. Wasn't a coincidence. It was war. Thomas left the building before Alice could reach him. She sat in the lobby holding a paper cup of cold tea, replaying everything in her mind. Her face on the news again. Memes circulating on company Slack. A headline already trending. Clumsy intern tanks CEO's reputation. Love, lies, and lattes. She wanted to cry. Instead, she taped a sticky note to her forehead. Certified corporate disaster, but cute. Still no one laughed. Thomas returned at 5:36 p.m. Alice was waiting by his door. He opened it without a word. She stepped inside, and for the first time, she didn't have a joke. I didn't send that, she said quietly. I know. Her eyes filled. You believe me? I always have. She choked out a breath. Then why didn't you come find me? He hesitated. Because I wanted to fix it before it broke you. She shook her head. You don't get it, Thomas. I already broke. I just taped myself back together with optimism and granola bars. He stepped forward, and for once he didn't say something smooth. He just held her, hypely, without fear. That night the proof arrived. IT confirmed the device. Natasha's name, the login from outside the building, the timestamp. She had hacked Alice's account and sent the email. The legal team gathered, so did the board. And when Thomas walked in, with Alice at his side, no one dared speak. He placed the report on the table like a sword. Anyone want to question her now? Silence. And Natasha? She wasn't there. She'd already vanished. Alice stood on the rooftop that night, gripping the railing like it was the only real thing in her world. Thomas found her again. I didn't expect this, she whispered. He stepped beside her. I did. She looked up. You did. I knew anyone who could make me laugh like that was going to be dangerous. She smiled, tears in her eyes. He turned to face her fully. Alice Silva, you are not a mistake, you're a revolution. She blinked. I'm also really hungry. He chuckled. Then let's start this revolution with snacks. Back downstairs, the vending machine ate her dollar. She kicked it once, lovingly. Thomas inserted his card instead. High-stakes dinner, he said. And when she pulled out a single sad granola bar, she held it up. To surviving betrayal, she toasted. He raised an imaginary glass. To telling the truth so loudly it silences everything else. Their hands brushed. And for the first time, it wasn't a maybe, it was a beginning. The rooftop kiss. That changed everything. The rumor mill was dying. For once, the only thing people whispered about was how quiet it had become. No anonymous emails. No Natasha sightings. No new scandals. But Alice, She didn't trust the silence. "Peace," she muttered, taping a caution sign to her printer, "is just chaos taking a nap." Still, she smiled more, laughed more, even wore her Queen of Corporate Chaos badge like a royal sash. When employees passed her in the hall, they nodded, not in fear or pity, but like soldiers recognizing one of their own. Even Thomas changed. He no longer kept his office door closed. He no longer looked like he was rehearsing for a life he didn't want. And most of all, he no longer looked away when he saw her. On Thursday, just before sunset, Thomas asked, "Want to see something?" She raised an eyebrow. "Is it another secret floor? I still think your copy room hides a portal." He said nothing. Just led her up 3 stairwells, through a locked maintenance door, and onto the roof. The city sprawled beneath them like a living map. Warm lights flickering across every building, like someone had scattered stars below instead of above. "Whoa," Alice whispered. "You come here a lot?" "Used to," he said. "Stopped. Didn't see the point. And now?" He turned toward her. "You're here." They sat on the edge of the rooftop, feet dangling into wind and wonder. She took out a juice box from her backpack and offered him one. "You're kidding. Grape or pineapple," she said. "I don't bring average snacks to Skyline moments." He took the pineapple and sipped. They didn't talk about Natasha, or lawsuits, or how close everything came to collapsing. They talked about old dreams, about how Thomas once wanted to be a pianist, about how Alice once thought she'd open a food truck for introverts. We'd have a sign that says, "No small talk, just sandwiches." Thomas laughed. Not politely, not rehearsed, but fully. And Alice swore she saw the boy he used to be hiding behind his perfect shirt collar. "You make me forget the buildings even below us," he said quietly. She looked at him. "I make a lot of people forget things, mostly passwords, sometimes birthdays." He didn't laugh. This time, he didn't need to, because something deeper had cracked open. The space between them narrowed, slowly, deliberately. Wind swept through her hair. His hand brushed hers. And then, like a decision made not with logic but with longing, he leaned in. Alice's breath caught. Then her eyes fluttered shut. And just like that, the city disappeared. The kiss wasn't perfect. It was a little too soft at first, and her nose bumped his. But it was real. And when he pulled back, only slightly, he whispered, "I haven't kissed anyone in a long time." Alice looked up, cheeks flushed. "I haven't kissed anyone without tripping right after, so I'm already impressed." They sat in silence for a few seconds. Not awkward, not unsure, but full. "I think I'm falling," he admitted. She blinked. "Off the building? Into this." Alice opened her mouth, then closed it. She'd never had someone say that and mean it. Not without expecting something in return. So instead of answering, she leaned in again. Softer, slower. And when she finally pulled back, she whispered, "Me too." The next morning, she entered the office glowing like someone who'd swallowed the sunrise. "Good morning, building. Good morning, employees. Good morning, my favorite copier." She skipped to her desk, nearly knocking over a delivery guy. "Sorry, I'm in love with someone and possibly a liability." Thomas watched from his glass office, lips tugging upward despite himself. But love, like silence, doesn't last long without interruption. At 10:12 IEM, a courier dropped off an envelope addressed to Thomas Whitestone. Inside was a formal notice, a legal summons from the Langford family, enforcing the original merger clause between their families, which stated that if the engagement with Natasha was broken, Whitestone Global owed $100 million, 0 cents, in damages. Alice walked into his office just as Thomas was reading the last line. She stopped, froze. "You okay?" she asked, gently. He looked up, and for the first time in days, didn't smile. "Not sure yet," he replied. She saw the envelope, the gold crest, the familiar signature at the bottom, and the truth hit her harder than a fall down the elevator shaft. "Oh no," she whispered. "It's not over." Chapter 7. The clause that could ruin everything. It felt like winter had crept into the building overnight. Not in temperature, but in silence. Frozen glances. Still air. Alice sat at her makeshift desk by the copier, spinning her succulent plant slowly with one finger. She hadn't seen Thomas all morning, and everyone knew why. The envelope. As the clause, the engagement she thought was a memory, now clawing back into their present. At 11:42 a.m., she finally entered his office. He looked up. Tired, formal, strained. "Hi," she said softly. "I brought snacks. For emotional emergencies." He didn't smile. He didn't joke. Just said, "Close the door." Her stomach dropped. The document lay between them like a loaded weapon. Alice picked it up and read the words slowly, the kind of slow that happens when your heart is catching fire behind your ribs. In the event that the engagement between Thomas Whitestone and Natasha Langford is formally broken, a financial penalty of $100 million, 0 cents, shall be enforced against Whitestone Global. Alice lowered the paper. "So just to clarify," she said, her voice too light, "if you don't marry your evil ex, the company collapses?" "Yes." "Cool. So normal, so totally not a plot line from a soap opera." She forced a laugh. It cracked halfway through. Thomas sat down, rubbing his temples. "I didn't even know the clause was real. I thought it was symbolic, a pressure tactic." Alice swallowed. "Do you still have feelings for her?" "No." The answer was immediate. "But she still has power over your future." He nodded once, slowly. Alice stared at the floor. "That's a lot." He stood, pacing. "The board is panicking, shareholders are threatening lawsuits, legal is trying to find a loophole. But if they don't, you'll have to marry her," Alice whispered. "No." He looked at her. And this time, his voice didn't shake. "I'm not marrying someone I don't love." She looked up, unsure. "Then what happens?" "We lose everything." Alice blinked. "We?" she repeated. "You think I can do this without you?" For the first time since she'd met him, Thomas looked scared. Not of numbers, not of lawyers, but of her leaving. "I've spent years protecting this company," he said. "But the only thing I want to protect now is you." Alice felt her throat tighten. That should have been enough. That should have been the end of the movie. But life isn't a scene you can cut away from. "What if I walk away?" she whispered. "Right now." Thomas froze. What if I leave before I become the reason you lose your legacy? Your employees? Your name?" "Don't say that." "But what if it's true?" She stepped back. "I'm the chaos," she said. "I'm the girl with the juice box and a trail of broken printers. You were fine before me. You had order, control. Your world didn't spin." "I hated that world," he said sharply. She stopped. "I hated every silent, colorless, joyless second of it. You didn't ruin my life, Alice. You showed me what it could be." She turned away, blinking fast. "I need time." Thomas reached for her hand. She let him, but didn't hold back. I need to breathe, Thomas, just for a minute." He nodded, even though everything in his face said, "Please stay." Alice spent the next 2 hours in the only place that made sense, the third-floor copy room. She sat on top of the old filing cabinet, a Lunchable on her lap, talking to no one. Then she opened her backpack and pulled out a note she kept tucked in a zipped pocket. It was from her mentor, the one who'd written the letter that started this whole mess. "Some people will open doors for you. Some will try to close them. And one will walk through the fire beside you. That's the one you keep." She looked up at the ceiling. "Please let it be him." Later that night, Thomas knocked on her apartment door. She opened it wearing pajama pants and a hoodie, with a glittery taco on the front. "You came. You said you needed a minute. It's been 4 hours and 28 minutes. She smiled faintly. "Punctual as always." He stepped inside. They stood in her living room. Silence. "Why are you here?" she asked. He reached into his coat, pulled out an envelope. "Because I want you to see something." She unfolded the paper. It was a resignation letter. From Thomas. Her eyes widened. "You're leaving the company. If it means choosing between you and an empire built on threats, I choose you." Alice stared, then whispered, I must be, because you're the clumsiest person I've ever met. She laughed. And you're the stiffest person I've ever fallen for. He blinked. You fell for me? She leaned in. I tripped, but yeah, pretty hard. They kissed. In an office. Not on a rooftop, but in a cluttered living room with a glitter taco watching. And it meant everything. Because this time, there was no question what they were choosing. But across the city, Natasha wasn't done. Because when revenge is your only language, you don't stop until everyone's speaking it. Chapter 8. Operation Destroy the Merger. There are two kinds of storms. The kind that breaks everything, and the kind that clears the sky. Alice had never planned to be either. But the second she saw Thomas's resignation letter, everything changed. She was done watching from the sidelines. Done being a walking accident in someone else's game. And it was time to start her own. At 8:14 a.m., she stood in the company group chat. Not literally, digitally. The chat usually used for pizza votes or who took my lunch debates. But that morning, Alice sent one message. Alice, emergency meeting, 10 a.m., break room, come hungry, come honest. Then she started printing. Color-coded flyers. Timeline charts. Spreadsheets labeled how not to let a billionaire marry a viper. And muffins. Because rebellion tastes better with carbs. By 10:03, 20 people had gathered. Marketing interns, legal assistants, janitors, even the guy from IT who always smelled faintly of stress. Alice stood on a chair with a laser pointer and a muffin in her mouth. Okay, listen up. If you're here, you believe in one of three things. Justice, a free muffin, making sure Thomas doesn't walk down the aisle with a woman who thinks ethics is a type of handbag. Someone clapped. Probably for the muffins. She went on. This merger cause. It's a weapon. Natasha is holding it like a noose, and she's betting no one here has the guts to fight back. She paused. I say we make her regret that bet. The plan had no name at first, until the intern with pink hair raised her hand. Operation Destroy the Merger. The group nodded. Alice grinned. It's reckless, it's risky, it's totally us. Step 1. Gather evidence. Alice sent out calls for any videos, emails, voice memos of Natasha's real intentions. By noon, they had a full Dropbox folder titled Snake Files. Clips of Natasha mocking the merger. Voice recordings where she bragged, "This company's mine the second I put that ring on again." A photo of her petting a $1 million dog while calling Thomas emotionally robotic. "Gold," Alice whispered, copying files onto a flash drive shaped like a banana. Step 2. Leverage the leverage. Alice booked a room for the next board meeting. She wasn't technically allowed to attend, but technically had never stopped her before. She walked in, wearing her badge, her confidence, and a shirt that read, "I came, I saw, I caused mild disruption." Natasha was already seated, in full socialite mode. Pearls, red lips, pity in her eyes. "Oh," she said sweetly. "The intern speaks." Alice didn't blink. She walked straight to the screen. They plugged in the drive. "Let's talk about the real terms of this merger," she said. The room shifted. The video played. Natasha's voice filled the air. "He'll marry me again, he has no choice. And once I'm back in that office, the chaos girl gets escorted out with a pink slip and a pity card." Gasps, side eyes, a coffee cup hitting the floor. Then silence. Alice turned to the board. "I may not wear Armani. I may not understand 40% of the words in our quarterly reports, but I know manipulation when I see it. And this isn't love. It's blackmail wrapped in designer perfume." One man clapped. Then another. Then the room exploded in applause. Outside, Natasha stormed down the hallway, heels clicking like a countdown. Thomas met her halfway. "Do you think this proves anything?" she hissed. "It proves everything," he said. "You don't want a partnership, you want ownership." Natasha's eyes blazed. "You'll regret this. I will collect that clause." Thomas stepped forward. "I'd rather lose everything than win with someone like you." And it finally shut her up. Later that night, Alice found Thomas in the rooftop garden. She brought snacks, again. This time, fried cheese balls. You always bring food before major emotional turning points, he noted. I read somewhere that hunger makes people misinterpret their feelings, she replied. So I come prepared. He chuckled. She sat beside him. He turned. I heard what you did. She shrugged. I was tired of being the side note in someone else's power play. He looked at her differently then, like she wasn't a whirlwind anymore, but the eye of the storm. Still, strong, unshakable. You changed everything, he said. No, she whispered. You let me. And without nerves, without warning, she leaned in and kissed him. Not by accident, not as a joke, but on purpose, like a woman who'd chosen love in a world that tried to make her feel unworthy of it. And this time, there were no cameras, no agendas, no lies. Just two people at a kiss that tasted like freedom. Chapter 9. A Billionaire's Heart on Trial. You don't expect the moment that defines your love story to happen under fluorescent lights, in front of shareholders, with legal pads and coffee breath in the air. But that's where Thomas stood, alone at the front of the conference hall, his name under fire, his future under scrutiny, and his heart, for the first time in years, entirely unarmored. The shareholders' emergency meeting had been called less than 24 hours ago. The boardroom was packed. Whispers swirled like a secondhand storm. It was Silver. Personal assistant? No. The girl who turned the copier room into a TikTok dance floor? Yes, that one. Thomas straightened his tie, though it suddenly felt like a noose. He didn't look at the shareholders, not yet. He looked at her. Alice, sitting in the back row, wearing her lucky hoodie and mismatched socks like armor. She mouthed two words. Be real. Thomas stepped forward. The lights dimmed. He didn't bring notes. Didn't clear his throat. He just spoke. Some of you have known me since I was 12, when I sat in this boardroom with my father and watched him make decisions that built empires. You've watched me follow the rules, honor the contracts, make the safe bets. But what I've realized in this year, in this crisis, is that sometimes safety is just a slower kind of death. I was ready to sign away my future to protect an image until she walked in. Gasps, a few exchanged glances. Alice Silva didn't fit into this world. She tripped over it, laughed at it, changed it. She made me realize that I was running a company, but not living a life. Someone cleared their throat, uncomfortable. And yes, I love her in the most inconvenient, unpredictable, and irreversible way. Alice's eyes widened. Someone behind her muttered, "Oh, damn." So here's my decision. I will not marry Natasha Langford to fulfill a clause that was built on fear. I will not sell my soul to save the shell of this company. He paused. If that means stepping down, so be it. The room exploded. Voices, objections, gasps, phones out, papers rustling. But Alice, she didn't move. She just sat there, tears sliding down her cheeks, smiling like she'd just watched someone walk barefoot into fire for her. An hour later, the board was in private session. Thomas left the hall, exhausted but calm. He found Alice in the supply room, where she'd hidden with a donut and a stress ball shaped like a cat. You meant it? She said, still stunned. I meant every word. But what if they really make you walk away? He leaned against the doorframe. I walked away the moment you walked in. At 6:17 p.m., the verdict arrived. The board ruled in Thomas's favor. The merger clause was officially voided, citing manipulation, unethical leverage, and breach of good faith. The company would survive. So would his title. But more importantly, so would his love. Later that night, Alice dragged him to the office rooftop again. Same skyline, same wind. Only this time, they weren't two people kissing through uncertainty. They were two people still standing. What now? He asked, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. She looked out at the lights. Now, we live clumsily, honestly, loudly. And if the world throws another clause at us? She grinned. I'll throw my succulent plant back at it. And somewhere below them, the company's group chat buzzed with a new update. The group name changed to Clumsy Girl, Cold CEO, and the Company That Survived Love. Chapter 10. The Proposal Inside a Mess of Snacks. Most love stories end with a ring. But theirs? It began with chaos. And it was only fitting that the most important question of all came wrapped in snacks and sealed with the kind of laughter only two healed hearts could make. It started at 7:03 a.m., with Alice entering the office carrying an unreasonably large box. "Don't worry," she announced. "It's not explosives, just my emotional support snacks." The receptionist just sighed. She was used to this now. Inside the box were cheese balls, juice boxes, gummy bears, one small cactus named Bruce, and a thermos with tea labeled "in case of existential crisis." Alice was glowing. Rumors had turned to legend. The girl who once knocked over the company banner had now helped save the company. And even Thomas, the man once feared for being made of ice and spreadsheets, now smiled before 9 a.m. "Come to my office," he texted her at 10:26 a.m. She showed up with 2 muffins, a paper fan, and her usual sense of mild doom. "What did I break this time?" He shook his head, laughing. "No," he said. "For Britt, you step inside. It's like a movie, only better. You step inside. It's like a movie, only better. You step inside. It's..." He led her to the rooftop, again, but it wasn't the usual skyline tonight. This time there were fairy lights strung across railings, a picnic blanket, a tiny speaker playing an acoustic version of their favorite throwback song, and in the center, a heart made of snacks. Yes, actual snacks. Cheese bread, mini donuts, tea bags, and a line of juice boxes spelling out her name. Alice froze. Are you?" He stepped into the center of it and got down on one knee. Alice's hands flew to her face. "You're proposing in a snack circle?" Thomas grinned. "I figured if I was going to ask the most chaotic girl I've ever met to spend forever with me, I should do it in her natural habitat." She laughed, loud and shameless. Tears slipped down. He pulled out a small velvet box. Inside, a gold ring, simple and elegant, with a tiny, colorful gem in the center. It shimmered like the beads on her backpack. "I love you, Alice Silva. I love your messy, unfiltered, snack-carrying, copier-breaking soul. Will you marry me?" She dropped to her knees so fast she nearly crushed a donut. "Only if we serve juice boxes at the wedding." He nodded. "And cheese bread. And gummy bears. And no assigned seating." "Deal," he said. Then she tackled him with a hug so fierce the picnic nearly rolled off the roof. The wedding wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was with Alice. The microphone glitched during her vows. The cake tipped sideways. Thomas's uncle brought a ferret as his date. But Alice walked down the aisle in sneakers under her dress. Thomas cried before she even reached him. And when the officiant asked if she took Thomas as her husband, she said, "Yes, I do. I did. I will. Every version of me that ever existed chooses you." Thomas smiled through tears. "And I choose the girl who taught me that love isn't something to plan, it's something to survive, together." The kiss is clumsy. They bumped noses again, and the crowd roared with laughter. But it was perfect, because it was theirs. At the reception, Alice stood on a chair, holding a juice box in one hand and a cupcake in the other. "To love," she shouted. "To laughter. To buildings that don't collapse when clumsy girls walk into them. And most of all, to the guy who loved me. Loud, weird, and all the way through." Thomas raised his glass. "To the storm I never saw coming and never want to live without." And as fairy lights twinkled and music played and cheese bread was passed around on paper plates, 2 people danced like they'd never known loneliness. Because now, they didn't. The office that became a home. It's funny how a story that started with spilled coffee, broken printers, and a letter never meant to be delivered, became a love that neither of them could undo. Not with contracts. Not with clauses. Not even with the weight of an empire. Alice and Thomas never went back to normal, because normal had never suited them anyway. She still walked into meetings late, with snacks in hand and post-it notes stuck to her sweater. He still pretended not to laugh at her jokes, and failed every time. They built something more than a company. They built mornings with shared mugs and mismatched socks. Evenings spent on rooftops talking about nothing and everything. A kitchen filled with laughter, tea, and toast that always burned on one side. And in the quiet moments, when the world wasn't watching, Thomas would hold her hand like it was the only steady thing in the world. And she'd squeeze it back, just once. Because some promises don't need words. They didn't chase a perfect love. They chose the messy kind. The kind that slips, stumbles, apologizes, forgives, and still shows up the next day. The kind where laughter lives beside fear. Where snacks replace rings, sometimes. Where you fall in love in elevators, boardrooms, and copy rooms that smell like toner and popcorn. Thomas once said, "I used to build walls." Alice didn't knock them down. She made him want to take them apart brick by brick just to see the light again. So, if you've ever felt like a misplaced puzzle piece, too clumsy, too loud, too unsure, if you've ever been told you're too much or not enough, let this be your reminder. You are exactly the right kind of chaos for the right heart. And when it finds you, it won't want to fix you. It will choose you again and again and again. Not just entertained but seen. Tell me your favorite moment. Tell me if you've ever been the one who didn't fit in. Or the one who finally found someone who didn't ask you to change. Because love like this, it's rare, but it's real. And it's worth waiting for.